I do believe we have a very nice panel, and maybe it's a good idea to just each of you, as far as necessary, given the people in the floor, also to present yourself, so that we can. Thank you. That we can start with it. So Nele, Merlijn, is it?
My name is Merlijn Nijhof. I work for the Ministry of Finance in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, the organization is such that the Ministry of Finance is responsible for the coordination of PPP projects, and it's a knowledge center. I was responsible for the model documents, the DBFM contract, and the DBFM tender guidelines. And part of my time, I'm seconded to the Government Buildings Agency for a PPP project for the refurbishment of the former Ministry of Environment.
Marc Bollen, I'm heading the PPP unit within the Ministry of Transport.
Yeah, so my name is Bob Martens. I'm a partner at Degraeuwe. We are quite active on the PPP market, mainly in Belgium, but also internationally, on which in Belgium I lead. Our firm is present in nearly all PPP projects, either on the authority side or the public side, depending a bit who is willing to work with us. Yeah.
We do often. Yeah. So I'm Nele Degraeuwe. I'm from PNV. PNV is a Flemish investment company, but we also have an important role as a procuring authority. So we actually bring DBFM PPP projects to the market, and then we act as a procuring authority on behalf of the Flemish government. Then at the same time, we're also an investment company, and we invest in the SPVs that are set up. So once we've actually, through the process, appointed a preferred bidder, and the SPVs are set up, then we as Via Invest co-invest with the private investor. But yeah, here I think as tendering authority, my role here today is more important as a tendering authority, and for me more specifically I work on road infrastructure projects.
My name is Arent from Wassenaur. I'm a partner with Arent and Overy. We work both on the private as on the public side, as in Belgium, as in the Netherlands, so we are more or less a Benelux firm as well. At least we are global, but for this specific panel. And I'm also here in my capacity as chairman of the Dutch branch of the IPFA.
So we have to apologize Jean-Paul Schaaij, who is on his way, but maybe he will come in, but I think Marc, you will be able to cover also his part. We discussed a bit the content of this roundtable, and we will start with an overview of the deals that will come or that are on their way, both in the Netherlands and in Belgium, to then start to discussion the evolution in the procedural structure and the contract structure, and then also we will have a word of the financial instruments, but there also we have already had a lot of discussions in the past days, so we will see how far we go with it. Let us start with the first part, the introduction, and maybe Merlijn, you can speak a bit about the way how deal flow in the Netherlands and what your experience has been up to now on this.
Well, actually, on the slide you see the critical success factors for PPP worldwide. First, consistent political support for PPP, and we are very happy to see that in the Netherlands, and I think as well in Belgium, we do have that. Our recent coalition agreement is again very much in favor for PPP. The second one is our steady pipeline. In all these last yesterday and also this morning, there's a consistent request for how is the deal flow, how is the pipeline. And I can say in the Netherlands we started slowly. We started with I think 20 projects, and what you see right now is that we have a very consistent, reliable pipeline. I think Marc will touch upon the pipeline for infrastructure. I'm more into accommodation, And what you see that we had 5 accommodation projects these last years, and right now it's almost doubles.
Maybe you can further discuss a bit about the political stability. It's quite important. In Belgium, it's a difficult concept, political stability. We are lucky on the PPP market that it's more or less out of the hands of the political hands, because on the political side we cannot speak about a long-term political stability. And so thanks to organizations like PMV and others, we avoid that political is too much involved. We have one big project in the Flemish region, which was the Oosterweel project, where it's a perfect proof that involvement of political reflection can be detrimental for the project itself.
If I can add to that, Bob, I think on a central government level, both in Belgium, at least in the Netherlands and in Belgium, of course you need to look into Flanders and Wallonia. In the Netherlands it's completely fine because of what Merlijn just said. However, if you look at the more regional level in the Netherlands, the political component is far too large and it often leads to destruction and emotions. And it's not about the project in itself anymore, but about local issues. And it's to the extent of backstabbing even, which has nothing to do with the project itself. So the biggest risk in those regional PPP projects is in fact the political risk. So I agree completely with what you say.
Do you have something to add? No.
And maybe it's good to say that for those regional authorities in the Netherlands, we have PPP support in Jean-Paul, but he's unfortunately stuck.
He's held by a regional authority in the train.
Yeah, but he's very eager to do something about it.
So that's quite important. Then maybe it's here you can see some projects done or in the pipeline.
Yes, maybe it's good to show to the audience. Here we have the pipeline on accommodation only at a national level. On the above row, you see the projects that have already been put out to tender, except for the Court Breda, which should have been switched to the Supreme Court. Then the list would be perfect. The above row has been put out to tender this year, and the row below is still in the pipeline. And what you see, what we see in accommodation projects is that due to cutbacks and less resources, we have this trend in accommodation projects that we have this flexible working into the civil service, which means that we get multi-use buildings occupied by more ministries, like the renovation of the former Ministry of Environment, the Rijkwaterstaat 8, used to be only dedicated for one ministry, and right now we are working for the Ministry of Transport, which will occupy the building, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And what you see is that we will have more of these multi-use accommodation projects, and as well some special accommodation projects like the National Health Center and some labs.
Maybe, Marc, you can speak about the wet and dry projects that are underway in the Netherlands. It's a very nice map.
Yeah, it's a beautiful map.
It's your map.
Thank you. I can make it yours. Looking some 12, perhaps 13, 14 years back, Peter can correct me on that. DBFM started with the high-speed line in the Netherlands. It was a project which was procured on the basis of UK-driven documentation, and after that, the first dry road infra project that was in the province of Brabant. It was even before Jean-Paul managed into office as PPS support. He then was at the Ministry of Finance, working at a PPP unit, which was then clearly visible. that was then clearly visible to make PPP in the Netherlands possible. Now, doing the A59, it was basically translating the UK contract of the HSL and entering into and getting known Arent on that project to a phase where how do we want to go further with DBFM? One needs a standard, and so far that standard was next to the political commitment we had for over 10 years. Minister of Finance, well, it was rather in favor of DBFM. It was from the Liberals, Mr. Zalm. And that led to subsequent projects. The M31 in the north of the Netherlands was the first real road infra project of Rijkwaterstaat. Since the A59, that was tendered by the province of Brabant. After the A59 and the M31, we saw Koentunnel coming, and that took some time. And took some time. Why did it take time? Because the political support was, on one side was there, but it has to be combined with a certain ambition. And you can talk about a pipeline, or low-hanging fruit, but that doesn't bring deals. So in the end, one had to come up with a target or an ambition, which can be translated to projects. And one of the bigger ones were then coming, the A15, the A12, the A15 Rotterdam inbound, and the A12 near Utrecht. Again, we improved the standard DBFM contract from version 1 to a version 2. And then the credit crunch came by, the financial crisis, and people discovered that PPP it's not only bringing a better service to the road user or to the taxpayer, but it is a steering mechanism for improving your network management. That doesn't work over the whole country, but in certain areas it does. The present Minister of Infrastructure, Mrs. Schultz, she has indicated a list of 30 potential projects, and that's basically the pipeline. And potential 33. And, it's a pipeline which could lead to PPP DBFM, but also you may find that some projects will disappear. Not so far, not on this map. This map is correct, and you'll see that the red projects are coming in. So what we did with the road infra, we standardized the documentation, standardized the tender procedures, listened carefully to the market. We developed the standard DBFM contract jointly with the private sector. And the next step would then be, well, the wet sector. How different can that be? Now, it's rather different because in the wet sector, if you look at locks, sluices, it's important. Safety is of utmost concern, and that took quite some time to get a proper performance regime in place. When thinking about the river Maas from Maastricht to Rotterdam, that has an overall availability of 98.5%. The first DBFM there, the lock at Limmel, what availability rate should that have? 100? It would be impossible to develop a proper payment mechanism on that. But if it's 96, how would it relate to the overall wish of the 98.5? It's not easy to bridge, whereas engineers are relatively conservative. The aspect of relativity you don't see that much in the wet sector. They are conservative over there because of safety, and that brings them. But in for the wet projects, the lock at Limmel, the lock at Eefde, are the two projects which we expect that we can launch somewhere halfway next year.
That's nice.
There's more to come.
Yeah. So we will still be very busy in the upcoming years, I guess. And if we then turn to the Belgian side, of course Belgium is a federal state, but most of the activity is up to now in the Flemish region. I will touch a word on the developments in the Walloon and the Brussels region, but maybe Nele, you can explain a bit about the developments in the Belgian Flemish area.
Yeah. So even in the Flemish region, there's quite a diversion in who is tendering the project. So it's not always the government itself. So it's there's like tram projects that are tendered by semi-private authorities. So we as PMV, we are tendering projects in sports infrastructure, schools, road infrastructure, and also maritime infrastructure. I think the next slide is focusing on road infrastructure. And I think there, as a procurement authority, we've also been very innovative in the three first projects that are there. So the Zaventem Airport, the project there in the Kempen, and the project, the ring road around Ghent, which we actually tendered out as not as a standard DBFM, but in two separate procedures, a DBM separately, and then in parallel an F procedure. So I think we're coming back to that in detail. So, but actually we wanted to open up the market, or the DBM market, also to smaller players, which actually didn't turn out to work because of bankability issues and because of the bigger contractor players that need to be involved to get the deals closed. But it also had other advantages of having first a DBM contract tendered out, to have a good and a good competition on the DBM part, and then in parallel do the F part separately, also to have the highest competition on the F part. So then the different F consortia are bidding on the same DBM preferred bidder contract. So that's for the three first projects. They have been closed. Now there's also road projects in tendering phase. So there's the North-South Limburg and then the A11. So North-South Limburg is still in the first offer phase, but the A11 is a project that is now in BAFO phase. So it's also a particular project. So I think although we don't have that many projects in the Netherlands, our projects are quite typical, or there's some innovative and some particular things to say about them. So the A11 was a project, the pilot project for the EIB 2020 Project Bond Initiative, but I think we're also going to focus on that later. And then there's projects coming up, like the project in Ronse, which we will bring to the market next year. And then there's some more projects that the government announced that will come to PMV to tender out in the coming years. There's also sea locks coming up. So they're not on the map, but there is a pipeline coming as well for more projects.
Yeah, and also on the Brussels side, if you look to the other regions in the small Belgium we are able to create a lot of regions. And so in the Brussels region, the major project now, which is up and running, is from the federal state, and the new prison at Arent, which is the largest prison at 1,600 prisoners that will be built, because now we are still renting in the Netherlands a prison in order to put our prisoners over there. So that has to change. And then also in the Walloon region there are two major projects upgoing. The one is on the light rail project in Liège, where yesterday a decision has been taken for the selection of 4 of the 5 candidates. And also we have social housing. It's quite important in the Walloon region. There is about 1 billion budget available to develop social housing in the Walloon region, whereby large projects are in the construction phase now, like at Herstal, the former industry site of the weapon factory. FN is now in reshaping into social housing. So it's quite diverse. Also in Brussels is the light rail projects from the light rail company MIVB. It's similar to the Flemish project. It's about light rail stalling places and also the optimization by lease agreement. So first topic we now wanted to enter into detail is the differences that exist in the shift we have seen in the way how we proceed with regard to the selection of the private candidates, whereby 10 years ago it was quite classic to do this in negotiated proceedings. We have to go forward now in the competitive dialogue. And the question for Dutch persons around the table, you have more experience on that, and what are the lessons learned and the tricks and tips that came out of the proceedings, do's and don'ts a bit, what we can learn out of the experience we had up to now. But maybe you can start off and then we will do the...
Yeah, well, maybe it's good that, to say that we started with a competitive dialogue already some years.
2005.
So maybe it's already classic for us. And what's important, Marc already said, we made this model documentation also for the competitive dialogue, and we did this on the basis of our experience with the Koen Tunnel, and we soundboarded this with all the market parties. I think we had some very good models, made them together with the market parties under the supervision of the IPFA, the International Project Finance Association. Maybe you can say a little bit about it later on. You can find these documents on pppdutchgovernment.nl. They are also in English available. I think that's helpful. And what we see is that this procedure is quite a smart procedure, and we harmonize it because in the Netherlands we have, well, the Ministry of Finance with the supervision role, but apart from that, at the national level, the Ministry of Transport at one side for the infrastructure, the Government Buildings Agency at the other side for accommodation, and we try to harmonize as much as possible this procedure for all these projects. As far as the tips and tricks and the combination with the negotiation procedure, possibly I think, Arent, you can tell a little bit more about it because you did them both.
Yeah,
yes, I did them both actually. But and as a result of that, I could say that, well, the reason why apparently Bob and Nele are bringing this to the table is that you only implemented the competitive dialogue in 2010, whereas everywhere else in Europe it had to be
we had to wait until we were
2005.
put in breach by the European Commission before we have translated it into
But so in between you still used the negotiated procedure, and I was involved in the liefdeszoek spoorverbinding, the liefdeszoek, where I was working on the side of Infrabel, the tendering authority. And we were confronted with the fact that we could not use the competitive dialogue, although the competitive dialogue is not permitted, by the way, for the railway sector. So, and the conclusion was there are no differences if you do it well, because you need to have a level playing field, you need to make the same information available to everyone at the same time, transparency, all the issues which you have in actually every tender procedure, you also should apply in negotiated procedures. The only formal difference perhaps being that in the negotiated procedure, you can negotiate after a BAFO, and in principle that's not possible in the competitive dialogue, but after BAFO there can always be a FAFO offer, or an even better final offer, a recommitted final offer perhaps. So in the end, actually, although there are more rules with competitive dialogue, I don't see that much difference.
So there is an adaptation of the nomination of the process up to the culture that was living already between parties in order to continue like we were used to. There are some questions about knowledge sharing, about transition of information, and things like that, for which we see a kind of reluctancy in order to share information in the preliminary stage of
you mean by the tenderers?
Yes.
Yeah, the issue there being, but now perhaps it becomes a little legal perhaps, but the question is to what extent, especially when you have a kind of consultation stage in a tender, can you pick ideas from the tenderers which they have offered during the tender process? And as far as I see the development in the Netherlands, we see a clear difference between the more generic components of that information and the more specific and confidential components. And in my view, it would be very helpful if the government would be open for generic suggestions, where the tenderers would say to the tendering authority, to the authority, listen, you are asking now for these specific issues or output specifications, but we cannot provide you with a very good solution if you do not change that. So would you please change it? So we can have and the solution then is confidential, and the suggestion to change is generic. And if you manage that well, that process, in my experience, the private sector is very much willing to contribute to optimization of output specifications and tender documentation and contract conditions.
And maybe one point to add to that, one important lesson learned was, and that was combined also with the credit crunch and later the global financial crisis, is to introduce into this tender guidelines a so-called flexibility clause, which allows us to alter the guidelines and to adapt to the changing financial conditions. And I think this is really a lesson we would like to give to our Belgian neighbors.
What's your experience?
Yeah, well, we have had a lot of discussions also with our colleagues from the Netherlands about the two procedures, because up to now it's true that most of the procedures we've done were negotiated procedures, and since a year there's a couple of projects that started off with a competitive dialogue. But actually, in practice, it turns out that okay, the starting point is somehow different. That in a negotiated procedure, you know already more or less what you want. You can, as a government, set your output specifications, and then you're going to negotiate in a competitive dialogue. It's more that going to the market and build with your different consortia what you actually need and build actually the output specifications. And there, there it seems that there's more possibility for the private sector to come up with these ideas. But actually, we see that in our negotiated procedure, it was also possible. So it's a bit stretchable in the way that where we had negotiations, although there was already, or the tender documents were out, the output specifications were there. When new solutions come up, there's also room to maybe change one way or another and to allow for innovative approaches or for very good solutions to enter into the procedure. So I think there we are going to see which procedure we will use for the next projects. But yeah, the benefits of both procedures can be combined. And maybe a side remark there as well is as for a competitive dialogue, the private sector is invited to come up with solutions. It's also questionable whether they're so eager to come to the government and share their ideas already. So there it's in both procedures it looks like as the government being very not secret but try to take or to keep the ideas or with the private sector, but to accommodate
that's one of the aims, of course, that you have to make an environment in which for the private investor and the more innovative parts of this, you're creating the environment in which you can share this. As you mentioned, between confidential and non-confidential information, that's one of the way forward. I don't know, Marc, if you had other comments to add on this.
I recognize the picture Nele describes. When we had the negotiated procedure and we chose for the competitive dialogue in the Koentunnel tender, all the differences were stressed. And in the end, I fully agree with Arent. Now, there are virtually no differences. The key element in the negotiated procedure is that, wow, what's the price? And can we discuss the price? But the price is the consequence of input. And in a competitive dialogue, one considers the complexity of the project within its environment or within its solution. And it then gets a price, and what only can influence that price, that's the financing. We needed, due to market circumstances, some flexibility on that. And the trick for either procedure is talk and try to understand the other side. Try not to advocate your own position.
Perhaps if I can add, one of the big issues was in the transition from pre-PPP to PPP projects, so from the old days where the departments of transport and all the governments were, well, prescribing basically or making the design themselves and bringing them to the market, is that suddenly they had to stop that. And in fact, that was the big issue, because normally speaking, even on DBFM projects, the Ministry of Transport or of Housing had already a design in their heads, and they knew already what they wanted to have, although the real solution should come from the market. So the learning curve everybody has been on is stop prescribing solutions and ask your questions, and then you come to the famous poem of Rilke from 1903, Living Your Questions Now. Ask the questions, relive your questions, and one day you will find yourself in the middle of the answers.
Right, so that's quite interesting, and it's comfortable for the way how we will go forward also on the negotiated proceedings of the competitive dialogue in Belgium. Another topic we discussed and we discovered is that there is a difference between the Benelux region on the way how we look towards the institutionalized PPP. We had discussion in the other roundtable where the government is investing together with the SPV in the project. And maybe Nele, you can explain a bit why this model is used more and more as a standard model in the projects done certainly by Via Invest.
I think the slide there is actually showing two particularities. One is the participative PPP or the institutional PPP, because you see the PMV investment of 51%, the Via Invest investment in the SPV next to the equity and debt providers, but you also see that it's the picture of the DBM plus F procedure. So maybe, Bob, you want me to first focus on the institutional PPP? So Via Invest is Via Invest, which is Flemish region and PMV on itself, so the investment company is also 100% owned by the Flemish region. So it's actually a government stake in the SPV, which stays a private SPV because the majority shareholder is still the private investor, which we find through our tendering procedure. So it's important to state first that we take always a minority stake, so never more than 49%, and in the previous projects it's always been between 25 and 49%. One of the reasons is that the government benefits as well from the high return that is earned on those projects. But next to that, there's also an advantage, or if I maybe start with the concerns that come from the market, that there is some interference of the government within the SPV, which is not liked by the private sector. But as we see now in the projects that have already closed, we've been able to close them, so that's one reason or one proof that it works. But also that actually during the operational phase it turns out to be very good, because it gives comfort both to banks and to the investor that the government is present at the SPV level. If there's problems on the ground on the project, the government can spot it at an earlier stage than when it first escalates at SPV level, and then in a later stage comes to the government. So that's already an advantage. There's also this parallel route that the SPV does not only communicate through the DBFM contract with the government, but also through its stake in the SPV. We've seen there's also a learning that has been going on because the government set in the SPV the lessons that she learns there. For instance, there's some things that were forgotten in the contract or not covered in the contractual structure, that it's spotted there and can be taken on in future projects. That's for unforeseen problems. Also, the government and the private sector get to know each other better by sitting there together in the SPV. And then, of course, when it really would come to a problem, which we haven't experienced yet, when there would really be a conflict of interest between the SPV and the government, then there is still this security for the private sector that they have their majority stake in the SPV. So there's also a majority on the board for the private sector, and we also, because the members of the board from Via Invest, they really they act as in the interest of the SPV and not in the interest of the government. But at the end of the day, I think it should be that the interests of the government and the interests of the SPV are the same. And I think in that, given that the interest should be the same, everybody benefits from a project that is going well. In that way, we think it shouldn't be a problem, and it even brings benefits to all parties involved.
I don't know what's the reaction of the other panel participants to this model. It's not used yet in the Netherlands. But
well, no, we don't do that as for now. The Ministry of Finance is about participations. It's their responsibility. And for PPP projects, we only use a contractual relationships. It's not necessary as well to use participations as a way to attract investors, because we still have them available. And we also see it as a mixing of, there was also a discussion on the panel discussion before on public equity. We don't do that right now. We have as a vision, and I think the Ministry of Transport is also is their mantra, saying high trust in our contracts, in what we agree on in risk sharing, but also high penalty. And we don't have a very good experience in giving penalties to ourselves. So that's more or less the rationale.
Is your opinion, or how does it come that in Belgium this is then more used? What would be then? Is it just a cultural difference? You think so, or?
I think we have to explore why it was set up in Belgium like this, because I understand what the explanations are of keeping this in place. But what were the original thoughts of setting Via Invest and structuring it like this?
There's definitely an idea of getting some of the return back to the government as an investor. Or you mean by Via Invest and then keeping that out of the government?
No, the fact that we are in the SPV in an institutionalized model, it's mainly also due to the ESA duties. But maybe I see, Steven, you have opinion on this.
In one way or another involved in the beginning of the setting up, and one of the reasons at that time was PPP structure was not known for the Flemish government, and there was a lot of, well, is it privatization, what is this? We don't really trust it, so let's invest in so we can have better control, because they didn't probably not have a lot of confidence in the contract at that point, because the contract was also very new to them.
Yeah.
And that, I think that was at least one of the reasons in the beginning why it was set up in the way it has been set up.
Another reason is, of course, VT optimization, because one of the difference, of course, is that by this way the VT streams were different than if it is a strict contractual framework between a contractor and the authority, in which the way how we can optimize the VT streams were not in the same manner. So it's about 3 or 4% of the total cost that you can save, at least in Belgium, by optimizing in this way. As far as the authority is concerned, and that's still the case, and that's also another element which is playing is that if you look to the French market, which is totally société mixed, as Belgium is on the crossroad of cultures, it is not unusual that in the framework of getting IDs, we look at the neighbors and we try to combine the Dutch and the French, and so that's the result. The result you can see over there. And so, but I think there are some positive elements on the financial side, the VT and the ESA neutrality, because it is an additional burden not to become unneutral, because you have the institutionalized framework, and on top of that you have the contractual framework. And secondly, it is also from a cultural point, you together in one company, trying to make the best of it in order to create as much confidence as possible. And up to now, it is working quite well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, what we do see as a very important learning point, but Marc, please, that's the tender phase is going very well. The contracts are very also being transferred easily. But after that, after this tendering phase, that we do have some we see some issues in the operational phase. That you see a switch at the governmental side, the complete tendering team does something else, and then you get this new contract manager with this big contract and saying, what shall I do with it?
And sometimes there are also arbitrations coming out of this, like at, if I'm not wrong, at Kuntel, or is it apparently...
No comments.
Every project has its blessings.
But then I would assume you can only benefit from just being closer to the contractor, no? Because then even you spot if something goes wrong at the contractor level, you are already, or at the SPV level, you see it already, and because as a government you know better what contract has been signed. So the SPV, I think
yes, but it was.
I think PNV is exactly doing the opposite thing. They are reducing the involvement of the contractor in two ways. One way is because of the investment PNV makes, so that reduces the financial interest of the contractor in the project by 49%. Secondly, if you use the other element of the two models, and you decide that you really want to have a purely financial SPV, no contractor activity, then you really, in my view, make a very big distance between contracts on one hand and tendering authority.
Well, I think on your first point, if you have two investors, I mean, it's not because an investor is only 51 instead of 100% of the shares that this interest, okay, financially, but the interest stays.
Majority.
No?
But we will discuss it in a moment.
Erik is an investor. And,
we know Erik.
So you know Erik, okay.
Yeah.
1 million at stake or much more.
Yeah, sure, but
it's an interesting debate because how it's all the same. The all parts of the coin are every time there's an issue. If you are investing a lot in a project, you would like to have a strong say in the management committee of the contract management committee, which is a bit a board level. So at the end, probably it is all a matter of how you translate in practice the contract. But maybe I need to.
Well, this whole discussion apparently is about the P, one of the three Ps, the last P, which is called partnership. And the question is it a financial partnership, which apparently in Flanders,
is also proven.
And I understood that Leo McKenna in one of the earlier seminars said that at the 5th of December in the UK also there will be the introduction of public equity for the same reasons, and it's framing. It's about that we as a government would like to have a stake in our own infrastructure or something like that without perhaps any financial meaning. But there are also other ways to create the same partnership on a contractual level, and especially in what you can see in this competitive dialogue we're doing nowadays. There's a lot of emphasis on what we call management plans, and in the management plan the tenderers are requested to develop a decision or a management system in close coordination with the government. For instance, to avoid all these issues we were just discussing. And the question is, to what extent do you need an equity partnership, or can you achieve the same sort of goals? Let the whole thing function as a partnership, resolving all issues, de-escalate and escalate as soon as possible without going to arbitration. Because lenders, they hate disputes. It's, by the way, a very good idea also to have a dispute review board, in my personal view. But that's the question, and that's the challenge always. And some projects are better in that than others.
Maybe another differences on this slide is the split between the DBM part and the F part, and maybe Nele also there you can shortly mention why this is done and what's the advantage of doing so.
Yeah, well, actually, also how it started off 5 years ago or even longer is that it was to give a chance to smaller DBM parties to also enter into the PPP market, which was at the large contractors. So therefore, VMwest had the idea that if we would tender first the DBM part, also smaller contractors could come in, and then afterwards we would just we would look for the financing to finance that contractor. But that initial goal actually wasn't achieved because of bankability issues, because of we as VMwest also, of course, had to look at the bankability of the DBM contractor, and then it turns out that actually we see the same contractors coming up in the DBFM and in the DBM plus F structures. But the huge advantage which we think this structure has is that there's a particularity in the Belgian context that once we have our preferred bidder, we ask the building permit based on the design of the preferred bidder. So there is 6 to 9 months between getting in the BAFOS and coming to financial close. And that, of course, is a problem for the validity period of the financial offers, which is, you can't get more than 3 months. Or so the BAFOS are not really, can't be committed if the consortia already know that definitely there will be 9 months between BAFO and financial close. So that in this structure of DBM plus F, we could first tender out the DBM contract. Then once we have the preferred bidder, start up the finance procedure. With the DBM contractor, we go through the building permit phase, and then we will ask for the BAFOS. Then the building permit is there, and we can bring everything together, preferred F bidder and preferred DBM bidder, and come to financial close. And then, of course, there's a lot of challenges on the way that for the bankability, we as a tendering authority, we appointed an LTA that looked at the bankability of the DBM contract. So there was also a saving in transaction costs because the F consortia didn't need to have their own technical advisor, didn't have to do their own due diligence, but we actually did that transaction cost saving. And we saw in the end that there was huge competition then both on the DBM and on the F parts. But still, yeah, there stays some inefficiencies in the system as well, that on the DBM you're actually comparing different DBM contractors that actually would, if they structure the F together, they would not all have the same security package and so on. So actually by doing this DBM tendering on itself, we actually put sorry?
Yeah, to the same standards.
We have to bring them all to the same standards, and then maybe the project has already become too expensive for one of the consortia who actually can do it also in a cheaper way. But that can be some of the issues that is actually optimized at the end when the DBM and the F parties are brought together. So I think through what we have learned by doing three of the projects already through the DBM plus F way, we know more or less what standards we should set, how the contractual structure is, because of course we go in the first procedure, we go to the market with a DBM contract, which is something like EPC and MTC together. So it's also the whole structure we've developed these standard documentation, which has gone through 3 procedures now. So that's also something that helps us for future projects. But we're now looking at how to take it forward in the future, whether we continue with this approach or not.
What's your point of view on this? Do you think it would work, or it's something that you see as an advantage?
Maybe I see also PPP support in the room.
We're missing panel member.
Maybe you can join us and tell something about. No, on the table.
As you wish, but we'll see a seat free. On the table it's something original, but you can climb on the table, but you can take a seat also. Yes. Sorry. No problem. Yes.
On the table, yeah.
So what was the question?
So the question is a bit, the splitting up the DBM and the F, it's something which is not happening in the Netherlands, and to see a bit what the reaction about this. Do you think it's an interesting way forward, or is it something you would prefer not to do?
I think it might be an interesting way forward for especially the local and regional authorities in the Netherlands, since a DBFM contract for them is a long way for where they stand now. So if this might be a bridge for them to gain some knowledge and experience in these sorts of contracts, yes, I would say I'm in favor of that.
And from the other panelists?
I think you lack a little bit of the proper incentives in the contract. It's rather impossible to tender a DBM and then say, well, there are some contractual changes, so we have some some elements which we have to we have to reconsider that. So basically, you need to bring forward a full-blown DBFM contract, which can be in a light form when it boils down to payment mechanism, performance regime, etc. And how you then structure the dilemma of the bankability check versus who brings the cheapest finance.
But the DBFM contract is there. So in the end, the structure is the same as if it would have been a DBFM from the start. Yeah. So once we start the F procedure, that is based on the DBFM contract. But then the consortia taking part of that procedure are consortia of banks and equity providers, or debt and equity providers, to broaden it to.
Well, maybe you can combine this with a sort of a fund forming. I'm not sure how it's done in Vlaanderen, but we're thinking about setting up a sort of fund for investors. It might be interesting to just see if there's a possibility to.
It brings us to the next topic, but maybe
one comment I would make, but it's out of ignorance perhaps for what's really happening at the funders level. But in my experience, there's a huge synergy between the financing, the financial engineering, and the structure of the DBM part in it. So if you make it into two components, you miss that synergy, and you might lose a lot of money as a government, because to what extent are we going to have capex or opex? How much are we going to do in the D? And if you have those bits in already with all the financial consequences and exactly modeled according to your traditional DBM, and then put financing package, you miss the opportunity to fine-tune it to the last 5% or 7% net present value, which you could gain if you would have those two packages combined. But perhaps Erik, from your personal experience,
you have it on both sides.
It's a very interesting model in itself. It has a number of benefits which are worthwhile to explain, to see if you can do one exercise which benefits all of the bidders without doing anything, of course, to level the playing field, but reduces costs. I think that's very good. You see the model happening in practice a lot in, I think, in petrochemical, where you see a company who is tendering a DBM contract, trying itself to check project finance, and if it fails, there's simply no project. That's often the case. But then you take the risk as a tendering entity to bring your project to close, and it's up to you to bring everything together. And I'm not sure whether a tendering authority would want to do that. What I thought was the most significant problem in the DBM plus F model is that implicitly my view is that a government sort of pre-selects consortia of contractors, and once someone satisfies the minimum criteria, the government acts as if every consortium or contractor is as good as the other one. That's at least my
that's
sort of
one
feeling.
of the issues.
Here you see that financiers can have completely different views. So there is an element of bankability like percentage performance bond or cap in liability, which you can maybe say that's always more or less the same ballpark, and if an advisor says that's fine, then probably a lot of financiers will agree, although these days I'm not so sure. But there was definitely one of the two first DBM plus F models where the financiers told PMV, well, that's very nice, now you've got the final 2 or 3 DBM bidders, but this one is perfectly fine for us and we will fund it, but the other one we are not going to finance it because we think the credit of the company is too weak. And then you get into a very strange situation because you have 2 tenders, and you've got a tendering authority towards the DBM consortium who doesn't have a free choice to make and who has almost to break its own tender guidelines in my view, and thinks, well, maybe the best DBM solution is from consortium X, but actually I've got a banking group who's warning me that if they select X, that they're not going to finance it, and what are you going to do then? And that's in my view a very fundamental problem with the model.
That can be resolved by good selection criteria at the start, in my view, and that's also one of the lessons learned that certainly for long-standing projects whereby the selection is positive, that in the course of the project it's changing again.
Well, that's exactly, I think, the problem, because if you have almost 2 years in between, so what is today a very good consortium is maybe not so good anymore.
That's the same in DBM.
Yeah, maybe.
I just want to make the point that as well as we're moving now into the capital markets with ratings, a lot of the ratings during the construction period in particular are made on the strength of the consortia. They're not made on the strength of the project per se of the total period. And you may end up with a consortia that you like, but only gets for example, a triple B plus rating, whereas they're going to go into the market and they're going to get more expensive funding, and then you're going to have to claim from your second place consortia. I think it's quite dangerous in terms of claims arising, and that's what I think everybody, well, apart from the legal people,
Many lawyers hate it.
It all depends. But maybe going forward on the fund and the question how we can make, we have another question that we would like to forward to you. This is one of the, it's a nice project also. It's the bundling and the clustering of DBFM projects, which in this case was done for instance, sport infrastructure, which was also done by PMV. It's whereby local authorities are working together with the national level in order to create the SPVs or to give contracts. But this is now a contractual way forward, whereby one authority is doing the project line itself and on behalf of a lot of local authorities in order to create a clustering of projects, the lift structure itself. And that's necessary in order to get sufficient level of funding needs in order to attract the right players on the market. And I don't know how this is happening in the Netherlands too or not.
It's not happening in the Netherlands. So that's the short answer.
Perfect explanation of HR.
Yeah. But the longer answer would be that it's very interesting for us to see what the experiences are in Vlaanderen, because we face the same problems. I think there's a huge potential for local authorities in these sorts of contracts, but they need some sort of bundling, they need some sort of programming, because the projects are too small. They are difficult to be bankable, so to speak. They're not interesting for institutional investors because simply too small. So you need some sort of bundling. For that you need some sort of structure, like maybe less complicated.
No, it's a complicated side, but life is less complicated.
Yes, and you need some sort of standardization on the contract and the process side, just to smooth the process up.
So the project was, if I'm not wrong, it was about 38 municipalities and cities who all give mandate to the Flemish authority, who then work together with PMV in order to organize the process. Yeah. Whereby once the final DBFM contractor has been chosen, direct contracts are made between the SPV and every local authority. So that's working quite well. Another project was on the school building project in the Flemish region, whereby it was a reversed DB plus F project, whereby the authority started by selecting the F components, and whereby, of course, that's quite difficult, because as a banker you have to bind yourself to provide, in that case, 1.5, 1.6 billion euro for a project where you don't know what will be built, where will it be built, by who will it be built, and so the whole contractual framework was in that case quite difficult, because you have to roll out the whole way forward how this will occur in a very methodological way forward, which is, in my view, quite complex. But I don't know if other panelists would like to comment on this.
Well, the structure has so many questions for me that
You don't know where to start.
I don't know where to start. And some of the issues are already mentioned. We were talking about political support earlier and the biggest risk. And for instance, now you. I once was at a project with working for a public authority, with one public authority being my boss, and in the end at financial close there were 3,000 emails in my virtual file system, which I thought was quite a lot. But then I started to work for a project where there were 2 political authorities involved, and we did not yet reach financial close questions, whether we ever will, and there are now 13.5 13,500 emails and documents in my inbox. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh,
So
39. And,
yeah, 39. So
but it's close. It's close.
How
and
to
it's
manage
realized.
1 million documents and emails and people and boards and councils and committees and civil servants to deal with and to juggle this all. It sounds like magic to me.
Yeah, but it's a little bit magic, but it happens also, for instance, in the Brussels capital region on the IT infrastructure. The IRISnet is also a project which has been done by the region, whereby all the municipalities and all the social security agencies and all the university and schools, etc., has given a mandate towards the Brussels capital region in order to perform the public procurement. So it is not impossible, but it's of course how you address this and how you start this. And that's quite important also. Yes.
Well, you need clear mandates from authorities.
You need clear mandates,
But
and
you
that's the
also-
key. That's the key, how you structure that mandate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also need, I would say, some sort of minimum requirements for the banks. That would, I see the structure basically as a sort of a call option from projects and the authorities to call upon the financing from the banks. That they say, well, and the banks are willing to lend the money or provide the money if the projects meet certain minimum requirements. So
There would have to be a solid guarantee from those authorities, I would say.
There is another remark in the.
The UK had lots of experiments in the early days of the UK, and decided some of them really weren't such a great idea after all. But have you, at what point did you assess and working out the bank's money proposition on this?
Sorry, I missed the last sentence.
So going back, the UK did a lot of experiments with different projects for procurement under PPP, and had a bit of a headache with some of them in retrospect. And it's clear that they've now taken a more sort of sanguine view in terms of what they will apply PPP to. The overarching question they have is it going to deliver me value for money? So what was the assessment you went through to demonstrate that this does value for money, or are you going to?
Yeah, for the one of the major elements for the local authorities to step in is, of course, the fact that they don't have the personnel nor the knowledge in order to do a PPP project, and so by giving a mandate which was clear about the financial impact it can have on the local community and the borders in which they could also exit if these limits are not and these thresholds are not respected, there was not a real risk for them to enter into the project, because if the borders were not respected, then they could go out of it. And so it's mainly time-consuming, cost-consuming. It's bundling. It is, and so it is quite attractive to give a mandate, knowing that a local project will be realized within a certain
There's other
financial
ways, there's
portfolio.
non-PPP ways to realise projects. I mean, there are builders out there you can give some money to, and they'll build you a sports centre.
Yeah, that was that's the older alternative, where of course the local community has all
But that,
difficulty.
to my mind, looking at this, it's probably the alternative you should go for. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
true.
trying to work out, because you've obviously decided not to, and so where were the value propositions? How do you benchmark this against taking an envelope and giving it to your builder?
Well, for the contractor, for instance, it is a big difference because it is a bigger project. You attract different kind of contractors. You different
So
level
it's not a bigger project yet. You're
It
still
is-
building something in one
Yeah,
town.
but in the overall the project itself is
Portfolio.
the portfolio is far higher, and it's a lift project which also in the UK has been seen in several places, that by bundling projects you reach a certain level of interest, whereby of course you catch all the players at that moment. So that was one of the advantages also in this project. Sorry.
I think if you solve that puzzle, you are eligible for another Nigerian award.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Isn't part of the key here not that you increase efficiency because you standardize a number of things and you don't
Absolutely.
allow one particular entity or authority to agree on everything in the last bit of detail, but it also needs then someone to give up some freedom which is otherwise would have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the schools project in Eupen in Belgium was an excellent example. It's 60,000 people only.
Yeah.
They've done their complete schools estate in one project. And I'm sure that the individual schools had very little, well, they had some say probably in defining the boundaries, but once those were set, it was really left to the tendering authority and the contractors how a school would look like. And giving up that, I think in the Netherlands, that's probably quite a challenge to get a local community to give up part of its autonomy and to end up with an asset which is maybe functioning perfectly well at a good price, but not the way it would like to have it seen realized.
Yeah, so that's also, of course, one of the elements to consider. But
So how did you get to the authorities to give their mandate? And how long does it take?
Well, it's a matter of pushing a bit, but it is, to be honest, but if I may say so, but it's clear, it is easy.
By the subsidy that
Yes, also.
of course, that was the main driver to get them on board. They were subsidized, so.
Okay.
So there was some sort of pressure from the central authority to local authority.
Maybe quick, the last slide which we wanted to share with you, it's I think we have still 5 minutes, or if I'm wrong, we have no minutes long. So it's about the, but we discussed already yesterday and today about the financing instruments, and there are two elements that we want to discuss. It is the index-linked debt financing. Maybe Marc, you can speak a bit about as a concept.
Yes, I can. But since we are in overtime, I would suggest to do that another time.
Yeah.
The next panel discussion.
Yeah, that was all briefly discussed during the last 1.5 hours.
And with regard to the project bonds, we have a bit the same issue, I guess. Maybe you can say some words about the project bonds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been covered already these days, but yeah, actually the A11 project was already in the market since 2010-11, and initially it was conceived as a bank financed project, and so that in that way the tender guidelines and all the contractual documentation was into the market, and we as a government were continuously looking, of course, at or becoming worried about bank financing, about short-term bank financing, about prices going up, also with our time period between BAFA and financial close. What if prices go up in that period? So we were continuously looking at attracting other funding sources, and I think in parallel what happened as well was, as I said yesterday, and know that the institutional investors were also looking for projects, for infrastructure projects, bonds, because of the return and the I think these two things together, and then the EIB pilot or the Project Bond 2020 initiative, all these things sing together. Actually, in the beginning of 2012, we decided as a government to allow for the bond financing within the procedure of the A11 project. And so at that point in time, we actually discussed with the bidders that were in the running to see how it could still be done to have both a bank solution and a bond solution for this project during the tendering phase. And that's actually at that point that we adapted the tender guidelines to cater for this opportunity and so to allow the A11 project to still become a pilot project for the 2020 project bond initiative. So EIB offered then this credit enhancement facility to the bidders into the process, and now 2 weeks ago we've received the BAFOs for that project. So of course it's difficult to say already something about what it's going to become, but I can just say, like 2 weeks ago, what the intention was at that point, that we have now BAFOs from the different consortia that all contain a traditional bank financing solution, and next to that a bond solution. And so we will see now in the evaluation process what it will become. Then we will select in a month's time a preferred bidder, and with that preferred bidder we will then work further to see whether we will bring the project to financial close through a bank financing, or whether we will indeed close with a bond issuance. So yeah, that's where we are on that project at the moment. So I think yesterday there were kind of some blames towards the government of not being open to institutional investors coming in, but I think that is the proof of governments being flexible and listen to the market and try to to have these new solutions coming in and to allow them into the tendering procedures.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I would like to thank all participants and also the audience for the active involvement, and I wish you very good continuity of your process and of the market in Benelux, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.